Hey Unexplained Ones, this is Dr. Mounts, and thanks for tuning in to All Things Unexplained, where we talk about everything from Bigfoot to UFOs to astrophysics and everything in between. So if that sort of thing is for you, make sure to follow us wherever you podcast, along with a review and a rating. It takes a lot to get All Things Unexplained on the air, and this podcast is made possible by listeners like you. You can support the show by checking us out on Linktree at ATU Podcast. That's ATU Podcast. There you'll find links to all our socials. You can support us on Venmo. You can purchase your official All Things Unexplained merchandise, and you can even book us on Cameo. And now, let's get to the show.
All Things Unexplained, hosted by Dr. Mounts.
Let's face it, we were always ready to roll without him anyway.
CJ Derringer.
Ain't nobody perfect, right?
And Smitty Neebs.
I've never planned out hardly anything my whole life. I just freeball.
Featuring Cajun Man.
I'm just old nobody, somebody looking for somebody.
I want to give a special shout out real quick to our own host, CJ Derringer, a lone female warrior in a sea of male paranormal podcasters. This according to a recent article by The Guardian, who pointed out the fact of all the male paranormal podcasters that have emerged along with COVID. So congratulations, CJ.
It's its own pandemic.
That's right, a mandemic.
All right. Hello, all you unexplained ones out there. This is CJ Derringer. I'm here with my co-host, Dr. Mounts, and we are lucky today to have a man who is high in demand today, especially Dr. Avi Loeb. Welcome back to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so we have had Dr. Loeb on our show before. So if you are interested in his backstory or how he got to where he is today, you can check out our previous episodes 120 to 123 feature Dr. Loeb and everything he's done before. But today is a really important day. We're working with limited time because there is a historic hearing happening at 10:30 a.m. this morning. The Senate Armed Services Subcommittee of Emerging Threats and Capabilities is going to be hearing from AARO, which is the All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office. That's a whole lot to say right there. Anyways, they are talking about the potential for UFOs in the search of extraterrestrial life. And we have the guy who knows it all, Dr. Loeb, here to talk to us about a paper that he has co-authored with Sean Kirkpatrick, the head of AARO, as well as his search for extraterrestrial life. So we're going to start right there with what you're doing with the Galileo project and what you're looking for this summer. So tell us a little bit about that.
Thank you. So the Galileo project was established about a year and a half ago, and it has three branches. One is to look for objects like the first interstellar object that was reported back in 2017, Oumuamua, and there will be a new survey telescope starting operation in about a year, and we are planning to look for the next Oumuamua so that we can get more data on it. This time we have the Webb telescope that could help us both infer the size of the object, how much of the sunlight it reflects, and whether it has any propulsion. So that's one aspect of the Galileo project. Another one is to go after anything left behind or relics, fragments from interstellar meteors. These are objects that came from outside the solar system and collided with Earth and burnt up in the Earth's atmosphere. And there were two of them that we discovered with my student. And we're going after the first one from 2014. It was actually discovered almost 4 years before Oumuamua, roughly a meter in size, and had a material strength that is tougher than all space rocks ever detected. All other 272 meteors in the catalog that NASA compiled, by at least a factor of 10 tougher in material strength. And the interesting question is whether it was a spacecraft, whether it was made of some artificial alloy. So we're going to the Pacific Ocean in a few months and aiming to collect the fragments left over from this explosion and figure out what the composition of this object was, whether it was natural or artificial, manufactured by an extraterrestrial civilization. So that's very exciting this summer 2023.
Yes.
But the third branch, which is the one we're talking about today, is to look at the sky and figure out whether there is any object that is not natural, unlike a bird or a bug, not human-made, like the balloons that the US government shut down a few months ago, or drones or airplanes. The question is whether there is anything else, something that looks as if it's technological because of the way it maneuvers, because of the image that shows that it has bolts and screws on it, but it behaves well beyond what our technologies are capable of doing. And so that's the fundamental question. And the reason we are doing that is because the government reports about objects of this type that do not classify as known human-made objects. And so we already have an observatory that is collecting data 24/7 in the infrared, in the optical, in the radio, and in audio on property of Harvard University. And we're using it to make sure that we understand how the observatory works, to test it. And we are analyzing the data with artificial intelligence to classify objects, whether they're natural or human-made or anything else. So far, what we see is still natural or human-made. But of course, it's a mixed bag in general, and the question is whether there is anything else. And our plans are to make copies of this first observatory. We need tens of them spread in many locations so that we can get enough statistics on these unidentified aerial phenomena that the government is talking about. And in a way, what we are doing is complementary to Aero, because Aero is a government organization in the Pentagon under also the Director of National Intelligence, and their main concern is national security. The government cannot ignore these UAP because some of them may represent adversaries, so they have to consider national security threats. In my opinion, scientists cannot ignore these objects because one of them or more may represent an extraterrestrial origin. And that's the reason that the Galileo project is engaged in trying to figure it out. We are happy to help the government in that regard. And the government, in a way, already is helping us because when they shoot down balloons, they reduce the clutter in the sky, right? And moreover, they discourage adversaries, other nations, from putting balloons above the US. So it's all a blessing for us because we don't need to worry about those objects.
Right. So I have a couple questions for you based on a few things that you said. The object that collided in 2014, did you say that it's a meter? It's a meter in size?
Yes.
So that's not very big.
Yeah, well, that's in 2014, that was the first object
Right.
from outside the solar system that was identified by humans. I mean, this time the US government, and together with my student Amir Siraj, we calculated that this meteor must have originated from outside the solar system. So we submitted a paper for publication back in 2019 making this point, of course inspired by Oumuamua. And the paper was not accepted for publication because my colleagues argued that they don't believe the US government. But then the Department of Defense issued a letter to NASA in last year, in which they confirmed that indeed this meteor, the 99.999%, was from interstellar space. And they also released data about the fireball that it created about 10 kilometers over the Pacific Ocean. And we were able to infer that it's indeed tougher than all other space rocks that the government ever detected over the past decade. So 272 of them, and that makes it an outlier. And Most recently, we were able to pinpoint the location of this explosion to within a kilometer, which is extremely important when we
Okay.
will go there to search for the fragments. So,
Right. So how do you search for something that's a meter in size or fragments of it at the bottom of the
oh,
ocean?
I should say the fragments are the size. I mean, we don't know exactly their size because it depends on the composition, but we expect it because the energy released was a few percent of the energy output of the Hiroshima atomic bomb, and we expect the object to have melted into tiny droplets, and each of which is roughly a millimeter or less, so smaller than the head of a pin. And so, how do we expect to find those things? I mean, the ocean is about a mile deep,
Right.
and what we did is design a sled with magnets that will basically just scoop the ocean floor, just go over the surface and collect all the magnetized particles. The background is muck. We don't expect it to be magnetized. So that's one way, and that's if indeed the object was made of magnetic material that like metals that are attracted to magnets, but it's possible also that it was not. And in that case, we will use a sluicing device that will select the fragments based on their higher density than the background muck. So we have two
Okay.
options to collect those fragments. It's a very challenging task, and of course, we have an A team in terms of experts that led some of the most um, how should I say, the most ambitious expeditions, for example, to the deepest ocean point or to the Titanic. We have some of these people on the team, and I told them, one of them suggested that he will bring champagne just to celebrate when. But I said we will not drink that champagne until we find something. I'm really, there is a chance that it will be so difficult that we won't be
Right.
able to find it. But we are trying. I mean, without trying, obviously, we will not find it.
Right. Well, very exciting. We're looking forward to hearing how that goes, and hopefully you'll come back and share with us the details after this summer. But given our limited time, I really want to dive into this paper that you co-authored with Sean Kirkpatrick, especially given what is going to take place in a half hour today. And I'm sure you've been heavily involved in that.
First, I want to revisit that fireball. That was off Papua New Guinea, wasn't it? For IM1.
Yes, it's about 100 kilometers off the coast of Manus Island, based on seismometer data that we analyzed. Yes.
Dr. Loeb, what motivated you to write this paper with Dr. Kirkpatrick?
Oh, he just wrote an email to me one day that was about half a year ago and said, I will be in your area. Could we meet? Okay. I don't force myself on anyone. People just want to.
We're all forcing ourselves on you. Yeah.
Since my book came out in January 2021, about 2 years ago, I had maybe 2,500 interviews, and there were, I would say, hundreds of people that came over to meet with me, many influential people, some multi-billionaires. That's how I got the Galileo project funded. I didn't do any fundraising. People just came to me. With the expedition, for example, we needed $1.5 million, and I announced our intent to go there. And then within a few months, I had a Zoom call with a funder, Charles Hoskinson, that contacted me and suggested to fund this expedition. So, that was very rewarding. And these are people that I didn't know before that came forward and said that they were inspired by the vision. And I have a new book coming out in August 2023 called Interstellar. And it talks about, the implications for humanity if we find anything in the coming months that is of great significance. And of course, the government may have some data already that is classified. I don't have access to that data. But when Sean Kirkpatrick suggested to meet me at my home, I said that would be great. And he came over, and we had a nice discussion. And as a result of that, we wrote this paper. He suggested it. And by the way, the draft of the paper was ready, like I would say, back in December 2022. And I was I wanted to put some data in it, because otherwise I thought that there isn't enough content. And then about a month ago, he contacted me again and asked, what about the paper? And I said, well, I'm not sure there is enough material in it. But then I sort of thought about it and I said, okay, well, let's move forward. And I put it on my website, and then people went crazy. I don't fully understand it, because I didn't expect anyone to pay any attention.
Well, well, there's some serious things. Interestingly, we had you on our show in December, and I don't expect you to recall that because you've had so many interviews, but you mentioned to us that the director of Aero had come to your house and asked you to write a paper, and we mistakenly thought that the paper you were referring to was the one discussing UAPs in Ukraine. That's what we thought. We were like, why would he write a paper dispelling these UFO? Okay, so this makes more sense that this is the paper he wanted you to ask. But in this paper, you're talking about the potential for a mothership releasing these dandelion seeds to our planet to either, self-propagate here or to do scientific research, and that possibly they're using water to as their fuel, and they're using solar power. There's a lot in this paper that, yeah, people are very interested in. And for those that have not read it yet, it's called The Physical Constraints on Unidentified Aerial Phenomena. And it's only on your website currently, is that correct?
Yeah, because there was so much response, people went crazy, that I don't know if it will ever get published.
I don't think it needs to be.
There was so much attention. If there wasn't any attention, I think it would have been out by now on a public, website. But because of this response, I'm not sure what will happen to it, actually.
I don't think it needs to be published. I think a lot of people have seen it already.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. It's out there for the public knowledge.
I should say the dandelion idea was already briefly discussed in my book, Extraterrestrial. So, we were discussing in the introduction of this paper various scenarios for how probes will arrive to Earth. And of course, if you have a big spacecraft, it doesn't make sense for it to land on each habitable planet. We have Earth, we have Mars, we have potentially Venus. So, and also, if it lands on one of these, it will be one geographical location. It makes much more sense to disperse small probes in the habitable zone. And so that was the idea. And, I'm already involved in a space corporation called Copernicus that plans to design the technologies necessary for a small swarm of small probes. And this is an idea that was floating in my mind for a while, because with small probes, you have the flexibility of visiting many places, of being much more intelligent in terms of what you carry. And that has not been the approach taken in the past, where big spacecraft were used to land in one location, especially on Mars. So that came naturally. And of course, if there are functional devices near Earth, that could be one way by which they arrived here. They didn't arrive on their own, but they were dispersed by a bigger object. And the other reason that I thought in this direction was that Oumuamua and the second interstellar meteor, which was discovered by the US government in March 2017, about 7 months before Oumuamua, they had the same speed at closest approach to the sun, and also the same distance of closest approach to the sun. And that intrigued me, because then I thought, oh, maybe they are related. Maybe the second interstellar meteor, which was roughly a meter in size, was released from Oumuamua, which was 100 times bigger. And it was the size of a football field. And that led me to check the orbits of the two, and it looked as if the inclination, the direction from where IM2 arrived, the second interstellar meteor arrived, was different from that of Oumuamua. So apparently they were not coming from the same origin. And of course, if you have a baby probe released from a mothership at a large distance, even if the ejection speed is small, the arrival times could be very different. And the small probe can arrive to Earth while the mothership passes by at a large distance from Earth, because small ejection differences in speed could result in big differences when the two objects approach the Earth. And so we mentioned that as well in the introduction, but it's not as if there is any specific example that I can give. And as I said, this paper, as far as I'm concerned, since it didn't have a reference to specific data, I wasn't, thrilled about its significance. But other people found it interesting, so I guess
Yeah.
it served some purpose. And I should say, I'm speaking here on behalf of myself. Now, what Sean knows, I have no idea because I have no access to classified information.
I wanted to ask you, Dr. Loeb, do you consider yourself to be a part of Arrow? And were you asked to join Dr. Kirkpatrick this morning in front of the Senate?
No, I was not. And I'm not a member of Arrow. I mean, I'm not a government employee. We are not getting any funds at the moment in the Galileo project from Arrow.
So, what would be Sean Kirkpatrick's motivation to do this paper? I understand yours. What's his?
Yeah, I think it's the fact that we are pursuing the scientific method. A lot of people in the public do not understand the difference between the various organizations that express interest in unidentified aerial phenomena. Let me give you an example. There was a Politico report about my paper with Sean Kirkpatrick that came out a few days ago, and in it there was a person that represents one organization that looks into archival data that was reported by citizens, things that are open in the public, and they have a beautiful website. I don't know how much funds they have, but it looks as if they have a lot of funding, and their representative that is responsible for collecting data was commenting in the Politico article. Now, I was curious because I never met that person. I checked him out, and it turns out that his credentials is in real estate. That's his profession, real estate. So clearly he has no experience in science. And why would he be qualified to talk about objects in the atmosphere from a scientific perspective? He just made negative comments. So that's an
Right.
example, okay, of the culture that exists out there, of organizations that exist out there that say that they are really interested. Now, what are they doing? They're unable to build an observatory that will collect scientific data. So what they're doing is collecting data from private citizens that use their cell phones, that give them blurry images that say there is an object out there, but how can you tell if it's a drone or it's a balloon or it's just a hack? Someone can hack an image. But they are collecting it and they're saying, we are really interested. And he can say negative things about the Galileo project because he feels like he's also working on this subject. And then there are people that work on the subject by addressing religious aspects of UAP. Like, how is that related to what the Galileo project is doing? It has nothing to do with it. Religions can say whatever they want, but it has nothing to do with the scientific method, which is collecting data by scientific instruments that are under control, that are well calibrated, and that are documented and are repeatable. That's the scientific method. It's not going back to religious texts and saying, oh, there is a mention there of some object that could be a UAP. I'm therefore a scholar of religion and UAP, and therefore I'm equivalent to the Galileo Project. Now, this is completely different. And then there are other organizations that some members of them had experiences. I saw something in my childhood, therefore I'm a believer. And then a group of those people come together and say, we are exploring UAP. Now, what are they exploring? They're exploring their experiences, and also I had a podcast interview just a few days ago of someone saying, well, I'm working in the political arena, and there we rely on people, only on people. So why wouldn't you consider eyewitness testimonies as evidence for science? And I say, well, look at any car accident when people are involved. You hear conflicting reports from people that were involved in the same event. So who would you believe? Look at FIFA that had the soccer World Cup in Qatar. They used video cameras to infer whether there was a penalty or not. They didn't go to the players to ask them, what do you think? They didn't go to the benches or to the audience to say, to poll the audience. Everyone saw it. Everyone took photographs, like, what do you think? I mean, that's not the scientific approach. You can't rely on people. You have to rely on instruments. So the Galileo project is the first time in history, and within a few months, we'll collect more data than was ever collected in all the UAP reports throughout history in terms of the volume of data. It's just because we monitor the sky 24/7 with a dedicated observatory. It's not like we go for 5 days to Catalina Island and claim that we saw a hole in the clouds. Okay, like some groups.
I think I've seen that show.
We're familiar with this, yes.
The point is, going for 5 days and seeing a hole in the clouds is not a convincing scientific evidence.
Yes. So it sounds like you have as many people supporting you as you do getting in your way. But for today's sake, Arrow going to this committee meeting, are they trying to secure more funding to keep doing what they're doing? Are they presenting information that they've found? What can be expected from today's hearing?
Yeah, so I think the distinguishing feature of Aero, and I really applaud that, is they want to address the nature of UAP using the scientific method. And that is the reason that Sean came to my home, that we had conversations. That's the reason that we wrote a paper together. And let me just mention one additional important point, that a lot of people interested in UAP claim that they have evidence for new physics, and the evidence they have is just because of crappy data that is incomplete, data in which you don't know the distance to an object, and therefore you claim that it violates the laws of physics, because it's possible, given the uncertainty, it's possible that there is new physics. Now, that's not the way science is done. Let me clarify that again. Science is not done by crappy data that allows new physics to exist. That is not the way new physics is uncovered. New physics is uncovered when you have exquisite data that it takes years and a lot of effort to collect with state-of-the-art instruments, so that there is no way out. There is no other possible explanation, that you can't use standard physics to explain what you found. So for that, you need to work really hard. You have to get really good data. Only with exceptional data you can argue for new physics, not with crappy data. Okay, and that sounds trivial, but when I criticize the Ukrainian astronomers that did not have reliable distance estimates, and other people claimed new physics based on the fact that 20 years ago there was the Tic Tac incident, that's not evidence that the Ukrainians are seeing the correct distance. The fact that 20 years ago the point is, they need to measure a distance by triangulation, and only then let's start the conversation about new physics, but not before that. Okay, so that's another thing that that people that are not professional scientists do not fully understand, that to argue new physics, you really need no way out of explaining what you see from known physics. Okay, so you need exceptional data, and to collect exceptional data, you need to build the instruments, the observatory, and that takes a lot of effort. It's much easier to sit on the couch and express an opinion, or to write something on Twitter and express an opinion. Oh, I think this and that, and then say, I call my organization a UAP, an organization of UAP enthusiasts. You can do that without any effort. But there is a huge difference between doing that and actually investing a lot of your time in assembling state-of-the-art instruments that will give us conclusive data about the nature of UAP. It's very different. And people can, dismiss or say the Galileo project is just one out of 10 other. No, there is no other organization dedicated to this endeavor of putting effort of dozens of people building observatories to monitor the sky and collect state-of-the-art data.
So is Arrow trying to get funding to do that, to build state-of-the-art equipment to use?
Well, I hope so, because we have a common objective, which is to apply the scientific method to UAP.
Yeah.
Okay, so that objective, as far as I'm concerned, is part of doing science. From their perspective, from the government perspective, it's really important to figure out what these unidentified objects are, because they may pose a national security threat. That's why Congress, or today's hearing, are held, because otherwise, why would the government care about the scientific matter? Okay, so the reason they care about UAP is because some of them may represent human-made objects, and of course, if it turns out that some are not, I would be extremely interested in those. And I don't think at that point, if there is any extraterrestrial object, it's not the privy of President Biden. It's just like if we find what the nature of dark matter is, it will be known to all humans. It has nothing to do with national borders, national security. So President Biden should not be the first to know about it.
Yeah, that's true. So when we were reading your paper that you and Sean Kirkpatrick co-authored together, Tim had a really interesting thought on the water aspect.
Well, Dr. Lowe, we were just wondering because we have a friend of the show, adventurer Dane Beck, and he was a deep sea fisherman. And he had one of these stereotypical grizzled old captains, who'd been around forever. And he always told the other men on the ship about seeing UFOs over the water, and he would watch them sucking fish up out of the water. And everybody thought that was really puzzling, right? But then I read your paper and I'm like, wait a minute, what if they weren't sucking fish up out of the water, but they were just sucking, the fish were trapped in the water that they were sucking up to use as fuel. And we're talking about deep sea vessels hundreds of miles away from any land or any other military activity. But also, Dr. Loeb, concerning the water in your paper, a lot of these recent military encounters seem to involve UAPs over water.
Mhm.
Was there any connection there between these military encounters over water and the water in your paper?
Yeah, so I heard those reports from people who witnessed unusual phenomena above the water, objects coming in and out of water. And if you notice congressional, the original congressional, definition of ARROW was to investigate multi-medium objects, and there is a reason for that, because some of the reports talked about the objects getting into the water, and the question is what is going on, and we don't know. I mean, I don't have access to any data that was collected by instruments, and so we plan to place Galileo observatories near the ocean and look for that kind of phenomena. And I'm intrigued by these reports, and of course, water can serve as fuel, depending on what engine the technology is using. So, and that could be also a reason for visiting the habitable region around the star, because far away from the star, the water is frozen into ice and it's not as easy to use it. So you can imagine visits to the proximity of stars where liquid water exists and where life exists, just if these probes are trying to explore those regions. And if we ever find a technological device that came from an extraterrestrial origin, the fundamental, of course, the first realization would be, hey, we didn't expect that. What's going on? And it will give also an answer to Fermi's paradox. Where is everybody? Well, they're just here in your backyard. You haven't noticed. But the second question, of course, is what does it mean? Okay, what are these probes seeking? And that could take us much more time to figure out, because it's like breaking a code. You have to see what kind of resources these probes are using, what kind of information they are seeking, where are they going. So that it's sort of like an intelligence operation where you're trying to figure out something that you have no clue about. And we can employ AI systems in the process of figuring it out. There is no protocol as to such encounters, and I think it makes no sense to have a protocol ahead of time, because our imagination may be limited to what we experienced in the past, and what we find may be completely different. In fact, yesterday I sent happy birthday wishes to the director and producer of Star Trek. He will turn 100 years old on May 1st. Serensky, and from 1966. And he replied and thanked me. And, when I took part in the Ignatius Forum in the Washington National Cathedral in November 2021, together with Jeff Bezos, Bezos said that when he was a kid, he watched Star Trek, and that inspired him to venture into space, to establish Blue Origins. And it would be really interesting to compare what reality shows versus the scripts that were invented in the context of Star Trek or other science fiction movies. You see, my profession, my business, my interest is in science, and I want to separate the science from the fiction. And it may well be that the science will reveal results that are far more imaginative than the script of Star Trek. Just because humans, are, responding to their experiences from the past, and we've never had such an encounter. Like, imagine seeing iPhone 100.
Right.
What kind of buttons will iPhone 100 have?
Yes, no, very true. And it just seems like so many people are now starting to be really open to this topic and this idea. I know that there are, just like we said at the start of the show, there's podcasts about UFOs and UAPs all over the place. And I've been dying to ask you, just 2 weeks ago, we had people from the show, The Secret of Skinwalker Ranch on the History Channel. Do you know anything about that show or about that ranch?
Oh yeah, because I attended a Q&A with Fugel, the owner of the ranch.
You did. Okay. So we know that now that Dr. Travis Taylor, who works on the ranch and on the show, was part of part of Arrow. He was the head scientist for a bit there. What do you make of what's happening on that particular ranch?
Yeah, so I'm worried about this ranch for a simple reason, that its location is well known and that people talk about it as a site for UAP. And therefore, it's an invitation to all hackers. I mean, you know that a lot of hackers on the internet very often try to fool people. And in the same way, people can go there and transmit radio signals, change all kinds of things, just as just to confuse whoever is there. So that's the main worry that I have about the site that is well known, and its location is public, and was advertised on the History Channel. And for that reason, we will try to avoid advertising the locations of our observatories in the Galileo project, because I don't want hackers to confuse us.
Interesting. Okay, that wasn't something that I had given any thought to, but I suppose that, yeah, that people, I'm even thinking now they have a live stream of their skies, and certainly somebody could hack into that. And okay,
Right.
a very good thought. All right, well, I do want to be respectful of your time today and of this hearing that's happening in just 10 minutes, which we're all excited. Is it public? Can we check it out live?
Yes, it is public. It's
Okay.
open. There was an earlier phase which was closed, and that took place starting an hour ago.
There's always that closed
So
session
some of that, I think, sir, will save for closed
that we
session.
can't get into. Okay, so based on everything that we've talked about today, and it sounds like you have some people getting in your way, maybe some naysayers of the things that you do, and then lots of people that truly believe in what you're doing. What would be your takeaway for our listeners who might be skeptical about the search for extraterrestrial evidence?
Well, first of all, we launched 5 probes towards interstellar space. They were Voyager 1, Voyager 2, Pioneer 10, Pioneer 11, and New Horizons. So we know that there is at least one example of a technological civilization that ventured to interstellar space. It's us. And we did it over the past half a century. So just imagine continuing to do that. There will be many more probes launched in the future, especially as our technologies evolve, and we might send out AI astronauts rather than humans. And I talk about it in my forthcoming book, Interstellar. And the point is, if we decided at some point to take the $2 trillion a year that we currently invest in military budgets and allocate it to space exploration, we could send a probe to every star in the Milky Way galaxy by the end of this century. Tens of billions of them, CubeSats. And it's just a matter of changing priorities instead of killing each other to exploring space. I mean, just listen to John Lennon's song, Imagine All the
Yes.
People Living in Peace. That's not so complicated, right? It turns out to be complicated for us because of our heritage of zero-sum games, being engaged in trying to conquer pieces of land and so forth on this rock that we call Earth. But if we do find evidence for another civilization that was much more intelligent than we are so far, perhaps it will inspire us to have different aspirations in space. And another benefit is that we will start treating each other as equal members of the human species. You know, that a lot of the atrocities in human history were a result of a group of people feeling superior relative to other people. And that would make no sense if there is another civilization far more advanced than we are.
Right.
And finally, Alan Turing about a century ago talked about the imitation game. That's the Turing test for
Yes.
AI systems like GPT-4 imitating humans, and for us to be able to tell whether we are interacting with a human or a machine. That is the Turing test. And I see the imitation game going another level, which is our AI systems will aspire to imitate extraterrestrial AI systems in the future. Once we find them, those extraterrestrial AI probes, and that could elevate us in the sense that we will see what our future is like, because those civilizations who sent these probes evolved far more than we did technologically, and we can learn from them.
You mentioned something, and I'm going to butcher this, but in your paper with Sean Kirkpatrick about the potential for AI and 3D printing self-replicating, which is mind-boggling to me.
Right. Yeah, but if you think about it, this is just like imitating nature. I mean, nature does it already.
Right.
And self-replicating machines use DNA in biology. And interestingly, this concept was thought about by von Neumann, a physicist, a year before the structure of the DNA was realized. So he was thinking about self-replicating machines, and then biology. We realize that biology does it through the DNA, and of course, in the future, we can realize von Neumann's idea, and others may have realized it already using technology. And I should say that GPT-4 is getting close to being as complex as the human brain, because it has 100 trillion connections when the human brain has 600 trillion synapses. So it's getting close, and GPT-5 may exceed the complexity of the human brain. So we are already getting to a point where the machine will be as complex or more as the human brain. So we won't be able to figure it out. It may exhibit something that we will call free will. We may hold the machine responsible for what it's doing if it goes well beyond the qualities that it was trained on. And so we are getting, we created an alien in our technological belly. It's called the artificial intelligence. And that's an alien that we ourselves created. But let's look out for those that came to us from interstellar space. They may be quite more advanced.
Yes, absolutely, they might be.
Let's hope we didn't create our own HAL, H-A-L, because I noticed something interesting about the AI is this capacity for hallucinations, also known as lies, which I thought was really interesting.
Well, they imitate humans, so we all know that that's a weakness of humans.
All right, so check out Avi Loeb on Medium. We are so thankful for everybody that tuned in. Send us your questions, send us your adventures. We hope that everybody will stay happy, stay strange, and listen to All Things Unexplained. Thank you, Dr. Loeb.
Thanks for having me.
You've been listening to All Things Unexplained. If you liked this podcast, please do give us a 5-star rating and leave us a review. If you would like to hear more All Things Unexplained, be sure to follow us wherever you listen to your podcasts. Our show depends on the support of listeners like you. Find us on Venmo under the business accounts at Bigfoot UFO. If you can't get enough of us, please check us out at allthings-unexplained.com. A special thanks to our producer, director, sound mixer, editor, and the man who wears far too many hats. No, seriously, he wears a lot of hats. Dr. Tim Mounts. Without you, we couldn't keep the lights on. Thanks for listening to All Things Unexplained.